You know, some people pay a lot of money to hear a performance like that. Thank you for sharing your gift with us. Woo. What a gift. Well, I am so glad that I get the opportunity to share, to talk about my dad today on Father's Day. Man, if this is starting now, it's going to be a long message. I feel like I need to open by saying these 4 words that I say a lot in my life when I talk about my family. That is, my dad is black. I hate saying it. But so often people look at me and they see my pigment in my skin. And when I tell a story about my family, I feel like I have to justify it with those 4 words. My dad is black. There's one time I was talking with some friends about, or some strangers, some people I had met at a conference about hot sauce. Boy, we love hot sauce in my family. We were talking about how there's only one hot sauce that stands above all other hot sauces. We send teams and search parties down to Miami and South Florida looking for this hot sauce called Footy's hot sauce because my family loves hot sauce. In fact, my dad says hot sauce is the black man's ketchup because we put it on everything. We put it on French fries, pizza, spaghetti. We love hot sauce. But can you imagine me having a conversation with some strangers and saying, my dad says that hot sauce is the black man's ketchup without prefacing those 4 words, by the way, my dad is black, right? The other thing my dad loves to say is, black folks don't eat ranch. Who knew? Who knew? Now, granted, I recognize that probably many of his comments are for comic or a shock value to whoever it is he's talking to, and I'm sure that there are plenty of African-American people out there that do not like hot sauce and love ranch dressing. But I have to sometimes preference this when I talk about my family. Do you have to do that for your family sometimes? When you're talking about your family and they make a comment, you have to say, oh, by the way, my family is white. Or my family is Asian, or my family is black. No. When I was 6 years old, my mom's first husband had just joined the Navy. I was a 6-year. Can you imagine a 6-year-old Tony Sorrell? We had just entered Navy housing, and I was outside playing on the front lawn of our Navy housing duplex, chasing my next-door neighbor in a game of tag. He was African American, and he was fast. I always lost. He would tag me. I would turn around, try to tag him back. He'd be gone. He's probably an athlete today. I mean, he was so fast, even at 6. And I got so mad at him because he would always win. Until one time I had enough. And I said, that's it. You stop, you N-I-G. You know the rest of the word. 6-year-old Tony Sorrell, in that one moment, spoke volumes to the world that heard him. Out of my 6-year-old mouth, I had uttered a word that immediately indicated to the other kids and the adults that I was disconnected from my neighbor's culture. I was disconnected from that community. I was an outsider. That little boy ran in and got his dad. His dad came out. Great man. Nice guy. We were neighbors. I as a 6-year-old, had no idea what I was saying. I had just probably heard at one point in time someone with my pigment say that word in frustration to somebody with his pigmentation in his skin. But that nice man took time to sit down on the front porch with me and explain to me what that word meant. And it was mean. It was not nice. And to this day, I am sort of thankful I chose to use that word in that moment because I got to learn at a very early age the difference in that culture. Well before I knew that my mom was going to marry a black man. And I'm thankful that God used my neighbor in that moment to peacefully and patiently sit down with me and share about his community. After that, growing up in the Navy culture, we had a huge sense of community. No one paid much attention to racial differences at all. Nobody cared how light or dark your skin was. Nobody cared how slanted or wide your eyes were. We just knew that we were a community that had to embrace each other and protect each other. As kids, we all knew what it was like when our dads left for 6 months. No moms yet, just dads at that point in time. For 6 months at a time. Sometimes our dads became surrogate dads for other kids in the neighborhood. Or the idea that we had to move every 3 years and say goodbye to our friends, and we shared that in common. We knew that. We knew not to make friends with the locals because they didn't like us, because they knew that if they became friends with us, we were just going to move in 3 years. We also knew that at sunset, no matter where you were or what you were doing, when that bugle played taps at the end of the day, you stopped and you stood in honor of all of the Navy personnel that were on that base, putting their lives in harm's for us. All of my friends, my best friend Kenneth Liu, I don't even know what Asian country his ancestors were from. My girlfriend was Elizabeth Mers, I'm pretty sure she was German. My best friends Robert and Liz Villanueva, Hispanic. And my mom, at 10 years old, was about to marry an African American. I remember when I was 10, she had been divorced, and she sat the three of us boys down in a row and said that she was in love with a man from her work, and this man asked her to marry her. But the only thing was that he was a black man, and she asked us, "Are you okay with that?" Now, 10-year-old me, on the threshold of puberty, didn't know much about love or marriage, but I knew happiness, and I could see my mom was happy. And, bonus deal, we get a new dad, because our dad had abandoned us and left us. What's the big deal if he was black? Well, 45-year-old me knows how big of a deal that was. Back then, I might not have. In 1985, interracial marriage was not very common in Virginia. On a trip that we went to a diner in a small town in North Carolina, the waitress brought the bill for our family's lunch and actually placed it in front of me, an 11-year-old white boy, instead of my dad, a grown African-American man who was sitting at the head of the table. I had no idea. I said, "Mom, what am I supposed to do with this?" And she said, "Well, apparently you have to pay the bill, son." In 1986, after attending a new church, the pastor decided to take a few moments before the service to pull my mom and dad aside and say, "We just want you to know at this church, we do not approve of interracial marriage." We immediately left, and it was years and years and years before my dad ever walked back into another church. In 1992, my best friend, Sean Bowling, called me one day to inform me that his mother just found out that my stepdad was black, and we could no longer be friends. In fact, in 2019, I was talking about my dad's baked mac and cheese. It's the best in the world. I was talking about how he knows how to make baked mac and cheese. We have collard greens with it. The writer I was with actually gave me 1 star because he called me a liar and told me I made the story up, just get a better tip. So my dad is black. And I think that maybe part of me says this because I want to be able to identify with his community when appropriate. Since I was 10, his culture became my culture. I learned about new behaviors. I learned about music, art, comedy, food, expectations, histories, worship. One time I went to an all-gospel church. And I mean all gospel, I mean gospel people. I mean hooting and hollering and music playing, and there's like while the preacher's preaching, there's drums going on, and it was loud, and there was dancing, and there was shouting, and everybody was so joyful. And my 8-year-old little brother goes over to my mom and said, "Hey, Mom, when's Jesus going to come out?" Like, He knew. The Spirit was there. But I've also contributed to that community. See, in my family, Thanksgiving, I remember one time we were at my Big Papa's house in Virginia, in Chesapeake, Virginia. We had 10 meats for this Thanksgiving dinner. I'm not even kidding. We had turkey, fried chicken, fried fish, fried shrimp, ham, pulled pork, lamb, beef brisket, ribs, and crab casserole. But we had 2 pies, pumpkin and sweet potato, and that's it. And what did I know? I brought a Wisconsin apple pie with me. My granny looks at that pie and says, "Who brought an apple pie to Thanksgiving?" I was like, "Granny, it was me. I brought it from Wisconsin. We just came from there, and I brought it. I thought we could have it for Thanksgiving." She goes, "I never heard of someone eating apple pie at Thanksgiving." Well, I'm going to tell you something. People started eating that pie. You know how you cut a pie into 8 pieces? No. We had to cut this thing into 16 pieces. People were trying this pie. They were loving this pie. My granny, who was so offended, comes walking by the dessert table towards the end. There's one tiny sliver piece of pie left. And she goes, "Now y'all better save that last piece of pie for me." I love my family. I want you to think about your communities for a moment. Maybe it's a quilter community or a baseball community or video game community, motorcycle community, scout community. Remember what it was like when you first entered that community and you started learning about how things were done and the best way to do stuff? And I was 17 years old when I became a Christian, and I was welcomed into the Christian community. The embrace I received into the Christian community was something beyond that I'd ever experienced before in the Navy community or in an interracial community. The people in my church did everything that they promised they were going to do. They helped meet my needs. They discipled me. They taught me, and they taught me to teach, and they taught me to serve. They led by example. I saw Jesus in them. I went from being on the outside to becoming one with the caring community. And now each of these communities I kind of just fell into. I mean, they weren't really about my choice. I would even argue that becoming a Christian was not my choice, but more of a calling. But each one of these communities taught me that there is something on the other side for not only for us to experience, but to be a part of. In our passage today, we read the journey of Jesus and the disciples take through a road through the region of Samaria. It was not a well-traveled road for Jews because the Jews and the Samaritans did not get along. Also, there was danger and apparently crime. They would actually take 2 to 3 extra days to bypass this place where the Samaritans lived just so that they wouldn't have to interact with them. We might do that some today, right? Like we'll bypass the bad neighborhoods to make sure that we're safe. Can you imagine what the conversation might have been like between Jesus and his disciples when Jesus told them we were going to make the trip through Samaria? 2 years ago, VidAngel did this project called The Chosen. It's a television miniseries. Anybody here seen it by chance, The Chosen? Now, I realize there's a lot of great movies and there's a lot of great miniseries out there about the story of the Bible, but this one's a little different. First of all, it's 100% crowdfunded. So it's basically made on the backs of the donors who want to see it. It's free to watch, but you can give so that they'll make more seasons. My mom and dad have binge watched it a couple of times and recommended it to me. And the thing I love about these series is that the producers give real personalities to the biblical characters and allow us to imagine a very realistic portrayal of what it might have been like to live with Jesus in the flesh. I highly recommend it. And if you watch it, let me know. But I want to show you a scene from this where the moments that we just kind of talked about, where the disciples realize that Jesus has a plan to travel through Samaria instead of going east of the Jordan, which was the common road. Now listen carefully to how they've already decided in their hearts not to entertain the Samaritan route based on what they've heard about these people. They were not interested in being a part of this community. Check it out.
Hungry? Almost there. What city is that?
Jezreel, the southernmost town in Galilee. From that riviera east to the Jordan River. Rabbi, where are you going? Do you need something?
This way, friends.
I'm sorry, but the map shows that Jezreel is 2 miles southeast of here and is met by a road east of the Jordan. We need to adjust our course 30 degrees.
We're not going to the Jordan. We're going through Samaria.
Are you telling a joke?
There's a place that I want to stop. Plus, it makes our journey shorter by almost half.
And our odds of violent attack more likely by double.
Is that an exact figure?
Forgive me, teacher, but it's safer to go around Samaria by way of the Jordan than at the Decapolis.
Would you join me for safety reasons?
But Rabbi, we're Samaritans.
Good observation, Big James. What's your point?
Rabbi, these were the people that profaned our temple with the dead bones. They hated
That
us.
fought
They didn't-
against us with the Seleucids in the Maccabean Wars. I've never even spoken to a Samaritan.
And we destroyed their temple 100 years ago. And none of you here were present for any of these things. Listen, if we're going to have a question and answer session every time we do something you're not used to, it's going to be a very annoying time together for all of us. We'll be fine. And if we get attacked, Simon will be happy to show us what to do.
Absolutely.
Right. So follow me.
So this is a teaching moment for Jesus. So many people were going to be impacted by this one journey through Samaria. To start with, it was going to be the disciples. They knew nothing of the community that existed there except from what they've heard. They could not understand how Jesus was willing to enter a community that was different from his own. My favorite line is says that if we're going to have a question and answer session every time we do something that you are not used to, it's going to be a very annoying time for us together. How do we find ourselves today? Are we living into a question and answer session with God about who to love and who not to love? Should we love the straight but hate the gay? Should we love the black but not the white? Should we love the looters but hate the cops? Should we love the sin and hate the Should we love the sinner but hate the sin? Listen, the caring community will suffer when we allow ourselves to entertain other teachings over God's. Because God's teaching is love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourselves. That is it. And we will fall into a huge danger when we believe that there is an us versus them mentality. My message today is not really about the Samaritan woman, but I just want to mention her for a second. Because later on in the verse, it talks about, in verse 28, it says that the woman left her water jar and went back to the city and said to the people, "Come see a man who has told me everything that I have done. He cannot be the Messiah, can he?" She had been welcomed into a caring community by Jesus himself. In that moment, a miracle had just happened. And each one of us have the opportunity to be in this community today. All you need to do is answer the call to follow him. But really, this message is more about the people that she represents. I put some scriptures at the bottom of the sermon notes, Luke 10, Acts 8, all great places to learn more about the Samaritan people who were considered the others that Jesus used. But Jesus used a broken woman, the Samaritan woman at the well, to break down this other mentality. And God can use this caring community also to break down that mentality. Do you know and remember that the civil rights movement started in the churches? It needs to start again in the churches. Jesus, in verse 27, had just finished speaking with the woman. The disciples returned from the Samaritan town with food. And it says in verse 27, just then his disciples came. They were astonished that he was speaking with the woman, but no one said, "What do you want?" or "Why are you speaking with her?" It's obvious that the disciples were watching Jesus and learning from him and how to interact with this community. Brothers and sisters, we need to watch Jesus and learn from him on how to interact with communities that are not our own. We need to be motivated by Christ's love and compassion to do and to be able to reach out. The disciples need to be motivated by Christ's love and compassion to the others. We can do that. So do you want to see how it ends? Do you have a few more minutes? This final clip, Jesus has just revealed to her that she has had 5 husbands, and the man she lives with now is not her husband. You can read about it in verse 18. But make sure you listen to hear what Jesus said he's going to do about the barriers between the races. Check it out.
Oh, I see. You're a prophet. You're here to preach at me.
No,
Usually the one good thing about coming here alone is I can escape being condemned.
I'm not here to condemn you.
I've made mistakes. Too many. But it's men like you who have made it impossible for me to do anything about it.
How?
Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain. But you Jews insist Jerusalem is the only place for true worship.
They say that because the temple is there.
Exactly where we're not allowed.
I'm here to break those barriers. And the time is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father.
So, where am I supposed to go when I need God? I've never received anything from God, but I couldn't thank him even if I did.
Anywhere. God is spirit. And the time is coming and is now here that it won't matter where you worship, but only that you do it in spirit and truth. Heart and mind, that is the kind of worshiper he's looking for. It won't matter where you're from or what you've done. Do you believe what I'm telling you?
Until the Messiah comes and explains everything and sorts this mess out, including me, I don't trust in anyone.
You're wrong when you say that you've never received anything from God. This Messiah you speak of, I am he. The first one was named Ramin. You were a woman of purity who was excited to be married. But he wasn't a good man. He hurt you. And it made you question marriage and even the practice of your faith.
Stop it.
The second was Farzad. On your wedding night, his skin smelled like oranges. And to this day, every time you pass by the oranges in the market, you feel guilty for leaving him. Because he was the only truly godly man you've been with. But you felt unworthy.
Why are you doing this?
I have not revealed myself to the public as the Messiah. You are the first. It would be good if you believed me.
You picked the wrong person.
I came to Samaria just to meet you. Do you think it's an accident that I'm here in the middle of the day?
I am rejected by others.
I know. But not by the Messiah.
And you know these things because you are the Christ. I'm going to tell everyone.
I was counting on it.
Spirit and truth.
Spirit and truth.
It won't be all about mountains or temples.
Soon, just the heart.
You promise.
I promise.
This man told me everything I've done. Oh, he must be the Christ.
Hey, wait!
Your water!
You forgot your
Come see a man who told me everything I ever did.
Rabbi, we got food. What would you like?
Ah, I have food to eat that you do not know about. Who got you food?
Wait a minute. You told her? And she can tell others?
What food?
My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work.
You told her who you are? So does that mean...
It means we're going to stay here a couple of days. It's been a long time of sowing, but the fields are ripe for harvest.
And so it's time.
Let's go.
Yes!
No matter your race, your color, your sexual orientation, your gender, your faith knowledge, or no matter, like the woman said, what I've done, you have not been rejected by Christ, who died for you and calls you now to love one another. Will you join us in breaking down barriers in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit? Amen. We're going to close with our exiting song, May the Lord, Mighty God. We're going to close with that, and then I will give our benediction. So feel free to hum this to yourself or reflect. We can't join hands across the aisle, but would you just reach out and receive this as I read this last passage from the same chapter, verse 39. Many Samaritans from the village believed in Jesus because the woman had said, "He told me everything I did." And when he came out to see him, they, the Samaritans, begged him, the Jews, to stay in their village. So he stayed for 2 days, long enough for many more to hear his message and believe. Let that be our challenge today. In Jesus' name, amen.